alaikum and greetings to all. This video marks the third episode of this series where we will indulge into the fine details of the Bible and textual criticism. In order to better understand who Jesus, whom peace be upon, really was, we need to rigorously evaluate the authenticity of the sources that mention him. With that said, today we would like to answer the following question. Is the Bible the true word of God? To answer this question, we will discuss three main facts in detail. Number 1, the Bible contains forged verses. Number 2, there are thousands of textual variants in the Bible. Number 3, the Bible is knowingly anonymous. Let's discuss each of these fine facts in detail. Number 1, the Bible contains forged verses. The Bible contains verses that were not found in the earliest manuscripts. Don't believe me? Read the footnotes on some of the verses in the Bible for yourself. In fact, let's look at some of these verses together. In the New International Version Bible, the NIV Bible, we find several references in the footnotes of verses that were deemed as fabrications. For example, in 1 John 5:7, it states in the footnotes of the verse, I quote, "Not found in any Greek manuscript before the 14th century." We also find in the footnotes of John 7:53 to 8:11 stating, and I quote, "The earliest manuscripts and many other ancient witnesses do not have John 7:53 to 8:11. Even in the Gospel of Mark, which is the earliest of the Gospels, we find the same issue present. Mark chapter 16 verses 9 to 20 reads in its footnotes, "The earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9 to 20. It is therefore no wonder that numerous Christian scholars and preachers declared that they would not preach these verses, including Dr. James White, who has stated, and I quote, "I would not preach Mark 16:9 to 20. Scholars here acknowledge that these verses have been fabricated into the Gospel of Mark. More specifically, these verses are missing from two of the most important textual unsealed witnesses, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. These few examples only highlight just 3 out of thousands of places in which the manuscripts of the New Testament came to be changed by scribes. What is interesting about these forged verses is that they are all found in the King James Bible. But when we indulge into the NIV Bible, we find that these verses have all been deemed as fabrications, as highlighted clearly in their footnotes. So then how can Christian scholars truly know which verses in the modern day Bible are from God and which ones have been forged by men? What if there are more forged verses in the modern day Bible today that Christian scholars haven't been able to detect? This is only part of the problem. Let's proceed. Number 2, there are thousands of textual variants in the Bible. It is a known fact that New Testament manuscripts were copied and classified over the years. The fact is, there are over 5,700 Greek manuscripts of all or part of the New Testament. Furthermore, no 2 of these manuscripts are exactly alike in all their particulars, and some of these differences are significant. Because of this, many verses of the New Testament present an incredible number of variant readings across the manuscripts. In fact, scholars estimate the number of manuscript variants in the hundreds of thousands, some estimating as high as 400,000. Consider, for example, the Epistle to the Colossians, chapter 2, verse 2. This verse has a bewildering number of 15 variations. Consider the following. In the New King James Version Bible, the footnotes of this verse states that in this verse, the, quote, text omits both of the Father and, end quote. In the New Revised Standard Version Bible, the footnotes of the verse state, other ancient authorities read, of the mystery of God, both of the Father and of Christ, end quote. In the American Standard Version Bible, the footnotes state regarding this verse, the ancient authorities vary much in the text of this passage. Based on these variations, this verse is one of the many living examples of textual variants in the Bible. As another example, let's take a look at the textual problem presented by Luke chapter 10, verse 1. Looking into the Revised Standard Version Bible, this verse reads, "After this, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to come." However, looking into the NIV Bible, this verse reads, "After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go." As you can see, the editors for these 2 different versions of the Bible chose different readings for this verse, that is, 70 versus 72. But what did the original words of God say? 70 or 72? It is no surprise that in the footnotes of the RSV Bible on this verse it states, quote, Other ancient authorities read 72, end quote. Bruce Metzger, a Christian expert on Greek biblical manuscripts, had this to say about the textual issue presented by Luke chapter 10 verse 1. Quote, "The external evidence is almost evenly divided, meaning the manuscript evidence for both versions are strong. The factors bearing upon the evaluation of internal evidence, whether involving transcriptional or intrinsic probabilities, are singularly elusive. It is likely that in most of the early manuscripts, the numeral was written with letters of the alphabet. It was easy, therefore, for either number to be accidentally altered to the other. Those who transmitted the account prior to its inclusion in Luke 10 may have wished to convey a symbolic meaning in the number of the disciples, and it is easy to find parallels in Jewish antiquity for either 70 or 72. It is, however, exceedingly difficult to ascertain what symbolism is intended in Luke's account. So evenly balanced are these two possibilities, i.e. both readings, 70 and 72, that it is hazardous to dogmatize as to which is more probable. As you can see, according to Christian experts, the criteria that has been developed by the textual scholars depend largely upon probabilities. Often the textual critics must weigh one set of probabilities against another. Therefore, given the examples demonstrated, we can affirm Bruce Metzger's statement when he said that, quote, "All known witnesses of the New Testament are to a greater or lesser extent mixed texts, and even several of the earliest manuscripts are not free from egregious errors," end quote. So besides having to answer the question of whether the Bible is the Word of God, we have the difficult task of identifying which version of the Bible may be the Word of God. As we have highlighted, ultimately it's fallible editors that decide what goes into the New Testament, not Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. This leads us to our next and final fact. Number 3, the Bible is knowingly anonymous. The authors of the Gospels are unknown. In fact, they're anonymous. Biblical scholars rarely, if ever, ascribe Gospel authorship to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. As New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman tells us, quote, "Most scholars today have abandoned these identifications and recognize that the books were written by otherwise unknown but relatively well-educated Greek-speaking and writing Christians during the second half of the 1st century," end quote. Graham Stanton affirms this point when he told us, quote, "The Gospels, unlike most Greek or Roman writings, are anonymous. The familiar headings which give the name of an author, the Gospel according to, that is, were not part of the original manuscripts, for they were added only early in the 2nd century," end quote. Therefore, how can the Bible be the true Word of God if the authors themselves are understood to be educated Greek-speaking men who are not even known? For a book to be from God, there are very strict requisites that must be met. It must be free from human intervention and errors. As we can see based on the facts provided, the Bible fails to meet these requisites. In comparison to the Bible, the glorious Quran does not have these problems. All the Quranic manuscripts have been preserved since their time of revelation. No errors or human intervention exist in the Quran. Therefore, to conclude, if you are seeking to read a book that is 100% the Word of God, then the Quran is for you. Otherwise, if you stick to reading the Bible, realize that you are reading a book that may contain some words from God along with some words of man. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have more questions, then ask a Muslim. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum.